Good morning, everybody. Today is the 61st segment of Think Before You Speak series, the laws of Shemirat, Halashon, and clarity, maybe with a few stories. Leilu Nishmat, the Chafetz Chaim Zechet Tzadik L'Bracha, Leilu Nishmat, Aliza Bat Henriette, and her children that passed with her in the fire, Ruach Hashem Tenichena Began Eden, as well it should be for the Refuah Shlema of the Cholim of Klal Yisrael. As well, it should be a great zichut for our Bnei Chabura, for great beracha and hatzlacha, shmira min hashamayim. And these halachot should be dedicated for the shmira gedola and the hatzlacha and mazal of Chaim Davido ben Chayesar. Okay, today's halachot is titled Paying in Cash. I want to bring to you a scenario that you might have seen in life in all different types of venues. Could you imagine in a shul? A lot of times, things come up in the way of expenses, and a lot of people have opinions if those expenses should be paid or not. Could you imagine if there was something in the shul that needed to be fixed, and it came to a point that there was no more procrastinating? So now, the rabbi sits down with the board, and they say, guys, listen, we got to fix the ceiling of the shul. It doesn't look right. You walk into shul and it's dripping through the ceiling every time it rains. So the guys all nod their heads and said, Rabbi, you're right. We got to do this already. We can't put this off anymore. Fantastic. So the rabbi says, okay, guys, let's get an estimate. Let's find out how much it costs. And we'll split it between everybody in the board. And everyone agrees. Everyone who was present. Now, generally, there are board members that are not always by every meeting. So, the rabbi appoints one guy to collect the money, and that guy, right on the spot, puts out a check. Everybody on the table puts out their checks, and he turns to that guy and says, please pick up the other 5 board members who are not here and ask him to pay their due. As the guy is walking out, one of the board members turned to the one appointed to collect the money and says, listen, when you go to this and this guy, Mr. So-and-so, don't get a check from him. Ask him for cash. Because lately, the checks he's been giving out are bouncing. Just ask him for cash. When this guy who is appointed to collect the money goes to the other board members, and he comes to this particular board member that he was warned about, and he asks him, hey, do me a favor, don't give it to me in check, give it to me in cash. We need the money in cash. He cannot say, I'm asking you for cash because I heard from the other guy on the board that lately you've been giving out checks that have been bouncing. That is outright rechilut. Because you know how this guy's going to feel about the other guy when he hears that this guy's been telling people that his checks are bouncing. It's going to create tremendous animosity between these two board members. But he is allowed to act on the information, and he's allowed to go to this board member and say, listen, I'm collecting for the ceiling. You weren't by the meeting. Everyone's chipping in a certain amount of money, but please don't give it to me in check. Give it to me in cash because we don't want to have issues with the vendor. You know, he can make all the... We want to pay him right away. That he's allowed to say. Just don't say who you heard it from. Now, is the guy allowed to tell him, don't ask this guy for a check, get it in cash, because his checks are bouncing? Is he allowed to say that? Is that Lashon Hara? To say to someone else that this guy's checks are bouncing, ask him for cash, don't get a check for him. Is that Lashon Hara? Was he allowed to do that in the first place? The answer is yes, he was. That was done constructively for a purpose for the shul to be able to properly collect their money, and he did it privately. He didn't announce it in front of the whole meeting. He quietly brought him on the side and said, listen, you're going to collect from everybody when you get to this guy. Don't tell anybody. I know he's having tough times. Ask him for cash. Don't ask him for a check. He was allowed to say that. But when the guy goes to actually ask for the cash, he cannot say, hey, give me cash, because I heard from somebody that your checks have been bouncing. That was outright rechilut. So let's just get clarity. Rechilut is forbidden even if the person who's telling you about someone else is talking in a way that he doesn't intend to provoke any fight or controversy, he's saying it for the good, for a constructive purpose, he's allowed to say it. But even so, if the guy hears it and he uses the information to say it over, and while saying it over, he says who he heard it from, and that creates controversy, that already is also considered rechilut. And therefore, be very careful. Even with information that was allowed to be told to you, but to tell it to the next person, and it'll cause fights between people, that is still not allowed. You have to be smart. When information is given to you, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can do anything with it just because it was given to you in a way that was allowed to be given. You have to be the smart guy that's able to take the orange, peel away the peels, and use the fruit for the right use. Thank you for listening.